Hello and welcome back to Reactivity TV. I'm Amy Albero and I'm a licensed therapist.
I am Chris. I'm not a licensed therapist, but you guys watch a show tonight. You guys watched our episode last week. I mean, when Joan comes out and says, and I quote, I've been listening to the commentary of that guy, Chris, on Reactivity TV, and it turns out he's exactly right about everything. And I think I just need to open up and be vulnerable. Despite the fact that everybody in the comment section thinks that he's being too critical, he's actually, you know what? He's pretty right. And so I'm going to have my moment to shine. When that's basically the direct quote that the leading Bachelorette says, I mean, it feels like I got some credibility here, right? Despite not having quite the credentials that Amy has.
I must have missed that quote. And nobody.
I mean, I thought it was. I thought it was right there. It was. I mean, maybe I took a little bit of poetic license, maybe a smidgen exaggeration there, but really, I mean, that's effectively what she said, right?
Oh yes, exactly. She referenced what you said on our podcast last week. That is 100% factually what happened, despite the fact that this episode was filmed like back at the end of June. But totally.
Hey, listen, we can have different opinions about exactly what she said, but I heard what I heard. But let's get beyond that here for a second, and let's just talk about some key factors here, right? I think that this was a fantastic episode. I think that Pascal has a big problem that I think nobody is talking about and nobody realizes. And I got some feelings about Jonathan, and they're mostly positive, but I also have some concerns. But before we get into all that, tell the good people what we're doing here.
Well, thank you. I wasn't sure I was going to get a word in that opening rant. Yes, we are here. We are talking about Joan's season of The Golden Bachelorette. We are at episode 3. So we're going to be giving you all of our thoughts and opinions about what we saw tonight. But before we get into all of that, please make sure to hit the like button at the bottom of this video and also hit subscribe. We love that you are showing up as new subscribers in our inbox every time we see it. We love that we're growing our community here. It gets us to our next goal of 5,000 subscribers. So thank you for that little tap of a button. It means so much to us. And if you haven't subscribed yet, let's go. Let's do it. We're here. We're with you. Subscribe. Be along with us for this journey alongside Joan.
Yes, and also please hit that bell icon so that you're alerted anytime we post new content to the channel. So, I know that we're supposed to talk about the Bachelorette, Golden Bachelorette season 1, but obviously we've got some alumni to discuss real quick before. Over at Dancing with the Stars, our most recent Bachelor, Joey, and our most recent Bachelorette, Jen.
Are you now the unofficial Dancing with the Stars judge?
I do they have judges? I don't actually know how Dancing with the Stars works.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. So we'll get that in a second here. But for those of you who may be new here, we don't watch Dancing with the Stars. I've never seen it. I don't know what the rules are. But as it happens, Amy and I have been ballroom dancing together since 2011, 2012. And so we got a lot of feelings. And since we got this crossover thing happening, got to talk about it. And because things are better in threes, we have to add in a third contestant, and that's going to be Danny Amendola. Why, you ask, is it going to be Danny Amendola? Because I happen to be a New England Patriots fan. Sue me. It's my podcast, Tough. So we went ahead and we watched those three. Didn't see the judging. Don't even understand how the judging works. Doesn't matter. We start off with Joey. Now, last week we had said that Joey did a pretty passable job. He was clearly the best of the three. This week but he was also doing the cha-cha. Cha-cha is a fast Latin dance. It can be a little bit forgiving. It is a difficult dance, but it can be a little forgiving. This week, he turns around and does the rumba. Rumba is the slow Latin dance. Here's the thing to keep in mind. When you have a slower dance, less forgiving, when you make a mistake or your steps are not crisp, it is very noticeable. And what we saw here was, I actually thought Joey did a good, solid performance. He had really good upper torso separation. With the Latin dances, you oftentimes need some separation between your lower and your upper half that gives you nice crisp movements. Like many of us, myself included, he was much stronger on his right side than his left. He had some real ugly steps, we'll say, when he was going mostly to his left. But when he was going to his right, he looked solid. He looked like a guy who'd been dancing a long time. I thought he had a really beautiful step. His spinning step was a beautifully well executed step. That is a challenging step, even for somebody who's been dancing a long time. And where he really fell apart for me was his back crossover kind of like whip step. This is actually reminds me so much of when you and I have danced. Irida beat you. We actually did that. You oftentimes have to do that back crossover swing step, and Irida beats you up on it so often because you did the exact same thing Joey does, and you have that leg like not extended out. And it's a tough step for somebody who has been dancing for a long time. I probably would have excluded it from, and I would have actually done what Jen did. Jen does the same step, and her pro shortened the step up and made it a step cross in the back because it was clear she couldn't execute that step either. I think Joey's pro probably should have done the same thing. But all around, pretty solid performance. It, however, was not really a showstopper. He gets a solid score in terms of technicality and execution, but in terms of actual performance, I give it a relatively low score. Wouldn't call it a crowd pleaser. Moving over to Jen. I thought Jen being in the long dress this week was a real smart play because she goes and does a tango. We talked about tango with Danny Amendola last week. Really challenging dance for a new beginner, and the specifically the lower half foot placement. You have sort of this pigeon step sort of thing that's really awkward and uncomfortable for a new dancer to really understand. And putting her in that long dress meant they just kind of obfuscated and covered that all over. But her upper body contouring was fantastic. Really, that said that she put
Let's
in a
not
lot of
forget about
practice.
the one-armed cartwheel while
Well,
she
I was
held
getting there.
hands with her partner.
One-armed cartwheel was fantastic. So her growth, I thought Joey was pretty lateral to week one. I thought Jen took a big step up where her performance was sort of the opposite of Joey's, where Joey's was much more technical, but lower on the performative aspect. Hers was very high on the performative aspect, a little less technical, and I think they covered over some of the technical flaws by putting her in a long dress where you kind of shield some of the lower half. Then you come over to Danny Amendola. Look, I just expect more from a two-time Super Bowl champion wide receiver. It wasn't good. It was real bad. It was a
I didn't think it
jive,
was
but
real bad. A jive is
well,
really hard.
jive is hard, but it really, the thing with jive is that when you have this tempo can be a lot of different things. It can be a triple step swing. It could be a Lindy hop. It could be a jive. And what they actually did, it was a more of a fusion dance. If you notice, the opening steps were actually a West Coast swing. They dropped into then a jive. They did some Lindy timing stuff, and then they dropped back into jive. So it was really much more of a fusion dance than anything else. It just wasn't particularly technical. The one thing I did like was last week, they didn't separate, and it was very clear his pro was backleading the crap out of him, right? And this week she forced him into separation where they were doing,
Yeah, shadow position.
shadow position where they're disconnected. And what that forced him to do was make sure he could maintain the timing and show that he can dance this dance without being backled by his pro. And so I thought that was a good growth step. But relative to Jen and Joey, he is just so far behind in terms of the technical skills. And even on the performative side, it was a more interesting performance than probably Joey's. Certainly less than Jen's. But I just don't. I don't think he's got legs. I think he's not going to go far. But no one on this podcast cares about that because he's not an alumni of the Bachelor Nation. So I'm sure they're happy to see him go. You're all
So
mean
it
for
sounds
that,
like
by the
you're
way.
ranking Jen as the best of the three, Joey as second, and Danny as
I
third.
think Joey and Jen were very comparable. Again, I don't watch the judging scoring. I don't even know how it's
Yeah.
scored, so I don't know how meaningful it is. But that's I'd say they were pretty comparable. All right, let's talk about Joan. Give me your opening thoughts.
My opening thoughts are, gosh, we were really right last week when we talked about Joan not leading with a lot of vulnerability and being more guarded. So I, even though I gave you a little shit because of your smugness, yeah, I felt validated by what she was saying and what she was sharing, and wow, what a difference. And I felt closer to Joan. I felt more connected to Joan. These men, again, it was hard to see any of them go. I did not envy Joan's position at the end in the rose ceremony. I think I continue to really just appreciate this show so much. I mean, And as a therapist, wanting to give my take on things, it's a lot easier to do that with 25 and 26-year-olds who don't really have a lot of insight on their own. But these men are really pretty self-aware, and so they do a lot of my job for me. And so that's a lot of what I was thinking while I was watching this episode. Is just they're so insightful, they're so aware,
Mhm.
and so that was also really fun and interesting to watch. And I love when we have a big competitive group date. That's always really fun to see, and that there were some extra elements of this particular group date that made it fun to watch. But overall, I thought it was my favorite episode so far.
I don't think there's any question that this was the best episode of the season thus far. It was a fantastic episode in general. I got a lot of things that I really liked about it. A couple quick opening thoughts on it would be what a guy that guy is, right? I mean, that guy is awesome, right? I've been saving that for about an hour. You like that one, didn't you? Guy is such a stand-up individual.
Yeah.
He really shined here, and he shined with the other men. I don't necessarily know that he shined that much with Joan, but like I just really like this guy, even though he's probably the guy who gets the most screen time without actually being the primary character in the screen. And that's sort of a weird yet meaningful situation to be in. But there's no question I was very frustrated with Joan the last two episodes with the lack of what I considered authenticity because of her trying to be performative. It was
Mm-hmm.
going in that direction most of this episode. And then when we finally started to get the breakdown at the tail end of the Jonathan date, I saw the opening and the glimmer, and I'm like, oh, please walk through this
Right.
door,
Well,
please.
listen,
And
she reframed it for us.
mhm,
It and you're calling it performative. I called it perfectionistic last week,
sure.
and we're going to get obviously a lot more into it. But she did reframe it for us. She gave us insight into what she is actually doing in those moments when her
Mhm.
guard is more up. So I wanna strike performative from the record this week.
Without objection. I've been dealing with lawyers all week, so I got all my legalese happening. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I was just very hopeful that we were going to see her take a road that led to more authenticity, more vulnerability, and really just letting some barriers down. But I was not expecting just she just Rambo style just kicked that door down, and I
Yeah,
was here for it. I loved every second of it. And when I say loved it, I mean it was like I appreciated it. It was actually
yeah.
quite a touching moment. It was quite emotional. But I thought it was the delivery was on point. It was a really wonderful, powerful moment for her,
Mhm.
and I really think it now the season can kind of start,
Yeah.
right? And that's what it kind of felt like this was the turning point. 3 episodes in, now we can get serious about what we're actually doing here. All right, do you want to start with good date, bad date?
Yes, let's go.
Okay. So we open up with a day in Las Vegas, courtesy of a private chartered jet.
Mhm.
We're going to go with not very recreatable for the average person.
The Pretty Woman
Um,
date. Yeah.
Pretty Woman Date is a Pretty Woman. I Pretty Woman Date. Does that involve a private jet? I never
And
saw the
no,
movie.
it's just like where you get sort of like
Pampered.
treated, yeah, spoiled, yeah.
Yeah. Um, Look, I think it's pretty clear that this is a date where you can really take the time to connect with somebody because you're in a private jet with them for however long it is. You've got a private suite with a private piano player. You can be silly like they were, be goofy, but like you have a lot of private time together. Like the whole date was private time together. And you change up locations and stuff like that for a few times. You're put into some situations where oh, we're going to do some outfits and some kind of costumey type wardrobe, whatever. Like, yeah, I mean, solid. The problem is it's not an attainable date for the average person. So that's if you are of means, A+. If
Hmm.
you are everybody else, incomplete. You
Right.
know,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is definitely, as you're saying, that the benefits are um lots of quality time together. But I do think it really depends who you're on this date with, like Pascal, and we'll get into him specifically on this date more, but he was the right pick for this date. I don't know that any other of these guys would have been as into it and as appreciative as he was of it, because
Mhm.
he, as they say, enjoys the finer things in life. And so I think that he could really, like for him, it sounds like for him, there are parts of this state that are more accessible and are more attainable and are more familiar to him. But I think that this is just something that he could get down and silly with because it relates to kind of who he is. And like for me, this wouldn't, for me as the person on the date, wouldn't necessarily appeal to me. I don't love shopping. I don't, none of this, like, I mean, it would be fine and fun, but it wouldn't be my most memorable date. But I still think it's up there.
Yeah. All right. So then we go to a kickball game, the group date. I think the big problem with the dates this week are that they're not real dates, right? And none of them really are. They're all sort of they're TV dates, and so this whole kickball thing, I look at. It's a classic group date competition style. We see these every season a couple of different times.
Well, this
I,
would
I
this I guess the equatable version would be if you were going to watch your person you were dating go play on like an intramural sports team.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you don't get a lot of one-on-one time, right? So all you're really doing if you're Joan is you have the ability to see them, how they compete, how they interact.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the type of parent who's yelling at the umpire for every call that they think went against them that shouldn't have, or are they just like loving the game and just enjoying the moment and being a
Mm-hmm.
good sport? Like there are things like this that I do think are you can glean, but like that in and of itself does not make the date, right?
Yeah.
Those who won, obviously they get some one-on-one time, but this was just effectively a cocktail party.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I don't necessarily rank it particularly high on the date card. So I think that again, these are kind of harder dates to rank, but like D ish somewhere in there for me. What do you think?
It's tough because I'm trying to separate how fun it was to watch as a viewer. Like this was one of my favorite parts of the episode. So
Mm-hmm.
my grading of it is biased, but I love any opportunity to get really active. I love sports. I love that. And so like for me that's really important. That's why I can't watch you play volleyball because you're not great at it. And
I am a professional vacation volleyball player. I am the best person usually, except for the staff, on the court in the sand.
but for me it's one of the most appealing things about a person is like their ability, their athletic ability. I just I find that really appealing, really attractive. And so this would be something that would be important for me to see. Not that we're going to play sports, but I live an active lifestyle and I would want to be with someone that could help cultivate that and do that with me. And so yes, there's not a lot of time to build a connection, but there's time to kind of create an assessment about what your life could be like, or your dating life with this person could be.
Yeah, reason 552 why I'm confused how we ended up married together. You're an athlete who values athletics. I am not an athlete who doesn't value athletics in a partner. Yeah, there we go. You won't watch me play the one thing sport I'm kind of good at.
Are you?
I mean, I score points.
I've seen your serve.
It's gotten better. All right, leading on to the third date. This is the very classic cowboy date.
Yeah.
We've seen this every season. Yeah, riding a horse. Yeah, we can go back and we can hear the commentary every season about this one. Don't love it. You're on separate horses. You're usually walking single file. It's like awkward to have conversations. You're craning your neck. You're navigating. Neither one of these two people have really like interacted or been on horses or have any experience in the equestrian arts, and thus I think it's just a bad date as an activity. Obviously, you bump it up a little bit by having some time to sit on a bench. The magical, mystical mobile benches that just pop out everywhere in front of the pond. I think that salvages it a little bit here. And Jonathan certainly made the most of his opportunity. But like as a date, I hate the cowboy date. I
They
just
didn't get a
do.
dinner. They just got a glass of champagne.
Yeah, he got shortchanged. Wasn't necessarily fair, but you know what? He got a rose, so and it's pretty clear that when he gets opportunities, and he's gotten a fair number of opportunities this season already, only 3 episodes in, he makes the most of them. So
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about Jonathan at this point. He's really shined every time he's had an opportunity to.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
know why they love this horseback riding date so much.
it's
In the
such a bad date.
comments, can you give us your thoughts about why we see this date so much?
Does anybody like it?
Admittedly, I'm trying to think if I've ever ridden a horse, maybe once when I was very young. So I don't have any experience on it. I can't like
What about when you
connect
went to that
to it.
high
Ride and high,
place?
that's where I would have done it. But again, really
Yeah.
young. But yeah, I don't know. I'd again love to hear from people about their either experience. Do you love it? Why? Or if you have any insight, why we keep getting this date.
Okay, so generally speaking, we are not particularly high on these dates in terms of attainable dates, but there was some value to them probably for Joan in this situation.
I think so. I think so. I
Yeah.
mean, she's someone we hear multiple times this and last episode. She's looking for fun. So for Joan, these were probably good dates for her.
So it's interesting you say that. She is looking for fun. She has said a couple of comments here in various different venues at this point that yes, she is looking for fun. She's looking for companionship. But the other thing she said in this episode, as well as others, that she also is looking for a provider. She's looking for a gentleman. She is looking for somebody mature and somebody that she's already been a mother and she's not really that interested in going and redoing that. One of the men on the episode basically let her know that he's still got a 17-year-old. And her reaction was like, oh, you're still like in it. And maybe I'm just reading into it, but that wasn't like oh, that's sweet. It was more of oh, that's a
Yeah, but
demerit for you.
he still got a rose.
He did
He
get a
got
rose. I'm
the
just
group
saying, I
date
think it's a demerit.
rose.
But I don't want to sidetrack us with that guy yet. We'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Where I think this is relevant is that I think Pascal has a bit of a problem here, right? And that is, as we saw in sort of the opening mansion situation, he is the butt of the jokes. He takes it in kind, like he's really endeared himself to the men in a way where people find him comical, even though he's kind of hapless and helpless. And but he's got one person making his breakfast for him. He's got another person doing his laundry. He's got like another person, cooking
Making
lunch
his
for him.
smoothies.
Making his smoothies, and everyone just sort of rolls their eyes and cracks jokes and laughs at him a little bit. But there is a serious problem here where I don't know how much money he has, but who's doing that for them when they get off
When
this
he's
show?
not here. Yeah.
When he's not here, is Joan doing that? Because that doesn't sound like that. He might be a lot of fun, and he looks like a lot of fun, and he definitely is a big personality and a character. And if you're looking for a great companion that you can go do stuff with, who's just going to be super into it and into having fun and into loving life, Pascal's your guy. But that aspect of life is a lot narrower than the monotonous day-to-day stuff, right?
Sure.
And so how quickly will being a mom to Pascal get old and annoying? Now, I think we've already seen that perhaps Joan is not looking for we're moving in together and we're going to spend 24/7 together. This could very well end up being a companionship where they never end up living together. And I think that is on the table based on what we've heard from Joan and what she's looking for. But I do think that this is a potential problem for Pascal. And I'm interested to see where that goes. So
I mean, you're making it seem like he doesn't know how to survive outside of the show. This man is 69 years old.
He
Clearly,
paid somebody $100 to do his laundry. He said in this episode, I tried to fold my own laundry and it's all wrinkly. Like,
no, my favorite quote is, I don't like to cook, clean, or do laundry. It's not for me. No. And I thought, you know what, Pascal? Same. I don't like it either.
You know what the best quote was? I think it was Jonathan whose quote was, some of the guys in the house are just gazers and grazers. They just stand around watching everybody else do stuff until it's time to eat, and then they start eating what somebody else cooked for them. And I laughed so hard at that. We've all known people like that, and obviously he's talking about Pascal as one of those people. So yeah,
Mhm.
but
But
yes,
listen,
look,
he somehow functions in the
mhm.
world for all these years, not enjoying and not knowing how to do this stuff. And he, you know what it reminds me of? Like there's like a, whether it's on Succession, I think it was, oh God, maybe Arrested Development. There's like a comedy um sketch of sorts where you ask like a really rich person how much a gallon of milk is, just to see how in touch with the world they are. And like on Succession, that one of the characters was like, I don't know, $20. Like, and that's kind of what this reminded me of with Pascal. Like, to pay a person $100 to do your laundry when you've been there for what, 3 days? Like, he's so out of touch with what things cost, which means to me that he must have some means, he must have some financial success. I imagine he's sending his laundry out. We've done it when our washing machine was broken. It's not that expensive in the grand scheme of things if you're a single person with not many expenses. So all of that to say, yeah, I you may also be making assumptions about Pascal and about what Joan, what that dynamic could look like. But I
I'm
hear
not
you
making
looking out for
assumptions.
Joan.
I'm
Joan is
simply
saying she
asking a
doesn't.
question. There's a
No,
question mark
I
at
didn't
the
hear a
end of that.
question in there. But listen, Joan has said repeatedly she is a caretaker. She is the caregiver. I can't imagine that she wants to take on another person to care exclusively for. So I
Mhm.
do think it's notable as well. But she seems to really enjoy her time with Pascal, and I
I
think we see
agree.
the depth underneath the kind of clown we get on the surface.
Yes, and we really see that in his one-on-one dates. But before we get there, I do have a really important question for you. How much is a gallon of milk right now?
It's like $4.
4 bucks? Okay. Because for the record, people, milk is disgusting. I buy like 1/2 gallon of milk a year for mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving. So that's why I don't know. It's not because I'm a man of means. So let's get into Pascal's date, shall we? Look, obviously, I thought it was cute when he thought he would get to drive the sports car, and Joan's just like, no. He was so giddy and excited, like a kid in a candy store. Every part, the way he makes fun of himself, and he's so self-deprecating in like this sort of oblivious sort of way, like, oh, we're going in a private jet, this is my style. The second that you get there into the room where now we've got a whole big wardrobe, select whatever you want to wear, and he just dives right in with some of the most absurd things. And by the way, for a guy who's 69, I was
Did you see his
surprised.
abs?
He has abs at 69. Like, yeah, sign me up for that workout diet regime. That's all. That's where I'm at. So yeah, he was. You said it before. He was the perfect guy to take on this date. I thought where it was really noticeable, though, it was a lot of clowning around and having fun. Um, but the dinner, I thought, struck home because this is
Mm-hmm.
where he had the moment to pivot to something real and not just being a clown. And like, who are you deep down, and what are you kind of hiding in all of this clownery? And what we come to find out is that he is a man who, supposedly came from very little means, and kind of made his way in the world, coming to America, not knowing the language, no money, and just working hard, and really following the American dream.
I think that like why money and wealth and materialistic things are so desirable is because they are such a tangible representation of your quote unquote worth. I mean, in some ways, yes, your actual like financial worth, and in a lot of
Well, and
ways,
your growth,
and your
and your
growth. And
and the
so
degree of success you've
there's
had. Yeah.
definitely an element of pride, right? Like
Mhm.
when we have been able to make big purchases or do things that are quite costly with our lives, like there is an element of pride in that. Like, look at that. Like, we can actually point to a thing and say, like, look what we did. Like, look what we created. And I imagine for a man that, again, had holes in his shoes when he came here, that it's no wonder that he'd want to acquire a lot of things. It also probably helps him feel very, very secure. When you grow up in a lot of scarcity, there's always that feeling that it can be taken from you. It's a trauma response, and so of course you're going to want to accumulate things, build up security in by way of like, no, I'm okay. Here are my things. Here are my belongings. And I think that also speaks to why Pascal might be gravitating toward, again, things, clothing, these like big ticket items. The other thing that I wanted to note about Pascal is at the end, Joan reflects back to him that it sounds like he's never in his life really had what she refers to as the feeling of a soft landing, feeling like if I fall, someone will catch me or someone will break my fall. And he said like, no, I've never really had that. And so to meet someone that has never had that and be able to be playful and be in the moment and be goofy and funny, that is a level of resilience that we just don't see.
Mm-hmm.
Usually someone who kind of walks around feeling pretty unsafe most of the time has their guard up. And we've talked about this so many times. Joy, playfulness, those are the things that we lose when we experience trauma. They're the most vulnerable emotions. And so again, it shows a lot about his adaptability, his resiliency, that he can, despite the way that he had been raised or the way that he had grown up, be able to be who he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, all around, I thought Pascal nailed this date. I think Joan reflected that multiple times in the various different face to cameras.
Mm-hmm.
He showed genuineness. He showed multiple facets of his personality. He showed depth and he showed vulnerability. And he
Yeah.
also just showed that he's a super fun guy. So, like, I don't know what more you could ask of a date than what
Right.
Pascal
I mean,
executed on.
and again, he's attractive. He is fun. And one of the things that Joan reflected in ITM before they even went to the dinner portion is even the way that he talks with her and makes time to still kisses with her and looks at her and compliments her. Like, it makes her feel beautiful. It makes her feel sexy and it makes her feel visible. And that was such a big thing for her, is after her husband had died, that she felt so invisible. And so here is this man being able to shower her with attention and affection that she is so clearly wanting, as all of us are, and that he was able to do that for her too. I have to say, I wasn't sure how this date was going to turn out. I wasn't sure that they'd actually be able to have a connection. But as Pascal sort of warned, like, don't judge a book by its cover. Like, make sure you read the whole story. And I'm so glad that we had an opportunity to read part of his story.
Okay. So, the second date that we get, a little bit of a curveball here. They bring us to a football field, and I'm thinking to myself, these are 60-year-old men. What are they doing on a football field? And then I had like suddenly a moment of panic when I thought, oh, maybe this is a rugby field, right? Which would be even worse. And then they bring them out and they decide to do kickball. Now, I felt a little strange to me that they brought out, Eric Dickerson and former football players on a
Andre
football
Reed.
field. Yeah, Andre Reed, to play kickball. But hey, look it, kickball's fun. I haven't played kickball in years.
There's transferable skills there.
Yeah, I would have expected maybe pull a baseball player, like give me Manny Ramirez or somebody like that. I just it felt like a little more symmetric, so to speak, right, or a little more synergy to the game. But that being said, I love this from an entertainment perspective. The aggressiveness with which the guys really went at it, they went hard. I mean, we're seeing 60-plus-year-old men sliding. Um, you know, some of them had some decent kicks. Not all of them had some decent kicks.
Pulling
Where
hamstrings.
well, here's the thing. I was getting a little worried. I love the aggressiveness. And I know what a lot of you are saying. Like, Chris, when the girls of the Golden Bachelorette were roughhousing in the pool, Golden Bachelor rather, were roughhousing in the pool, you had a real problem with that. Yes, because it's double standard. It's okay if old men do dumb things and hurt themselves. I find it much more tragic when women hurt themselves physically. Call me a sexist if you want, but men breaking bones to me is a more acceptable situation than women having broken bones. I don't know. Is that so wrong? Like I like my women to be safe and secure and healthy. My men, let them break stuff. Is that wrong?
Yeah, it is wrong.
It's wrong that I don't
Girls
want women
want
to
to have
get
fun,
physically.
okay?
So it's wrong. It's wrong that I care more if a woman gets physically injured than I care if a man gets physically injured.
Well, I think what drives, in this case, the women of the Golden Bachelor and the men of the Golden Bachelorette to potentially put themselves at risk are two very different things. Like, we still have like the competitiveness, the male ego, all of that stuff so at play. I think it was Keith that said our brains think we're 25, but our bodies say no, we're not. Like, they just, it was like they acted with their brain, and you could just see their body like just be like,
Like, what are you doing? Yeah.
um,
Yep. But that being said, there were some actually impressive feats out there. I mean, you got a full on head slide, which I
from
like.
Greg.
I'm
Yeah.
not doing one of those at 41. Somebody in 65 doing it, it's like
Every time you play volleyball, you are covered in sand. Are you telling me that that's not on purpose?
okay. First off, it is very different jumping around and landing in soft sand on the beach than literally in gravel and dirt, on the ground. I like and most of the time I'm not like full on head diving. A lot of times it's more of like a reach and a roll off to the ground, so
Timber
to speak.
over.
So yeah, but more of a like trying to get something slightly out of reach, not a full on dive, right? These are different
You
situations.
just prove my point here. Not an athlete.
Hey, listen, I score points. I got that overhand serve. How would you know how good I am? You won't even come watch me. You haven't
I
watched
can't do
me.
it. I can't. I sometimes
I
peer
know.
through the bushes and I have to walk away.
Oh, you can't see anything from that corner of the pool, though.
Mm,
They
I
put
see enough.
the lifeguard tower. Yeah, no, it's kind of like that thing with my cousin Vinny. Like, so this cruddy screen, this dirty window, these 17 trees, and I don't even know how many bushes, a lifeguard stand, 4 cabanas, and at least 3 to 8 people in front of me on the court. And you're going to tell me you can see my volleyball play? I don't think so. And your eyesight's not that good. You might just be confusing me. There's like 8 other dad bods out there that you could be confusing me with.
Yeah, but you're the only 40-year-old. You're the only person. No one is within 20 years of you. So you play volleyball with all men like this.
I do. I pretty much everyone I play volleyball with is 60 or older for the most part, except for the staff.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah, and can I just say the men of the Golden Bachelorette were more aggressive in their kickball game than most of the 60-year-old men I play volleyball with, which kind of pisses me off because, like, see what they're doing, people? Can you put in some effort here? Can you get the ball? Can you hit me? Yeah, can you set this thing up so I can come spike it or something? That's a joke. I can't spike, not sand. I don't jump that high. I'm a digger. Is that what it's called? You played volleyball, I remember.
So the blue team wins.
The blue team wins. Look, this was a great moment for them. Let's just talk about Charles L here for a moment.
Oh.
He shines this episode. I mean, this episode, and I have mixed feelings about this because when I say he shines, I mean as an audience member of this show, as somebody who is interested in seeing real conversation, real emotion, and authenticity about how somebody's life has transpired and the things that we could sort of like look forward to and things that you kind of want to get a better understanding and feeling for some of the trials that people have gone through in life. Like Charles L, Wise Charles, is just a wonderful narrator of that for us. That being said, it is a double-edged sword here because nothing about what we're learning about him is saying to me like he and Joan should end up together.
Mm-hmm.
He just strikes me as he's not ready. This is a journey, and this is an important journey for him. And I think he's getting a lot out of this journey, but this journey does not end with him and Joan together. This
Yeah.
journey probably does not end with him even saying, hey, you know what? I think I want to date again. I think this journey ends, with him alone coming to terms, and sort of coming and coming to peace with the fact that his wife has passed and that there's nothing to
Hmm.
be done.
Hmm.
And that is
Hmm.
really valuable. And I think that is sort of the unsung aspect of this episode. That yes, a lot of people have said Charles L. awesome, really meaningful, emotional, loved him, but like I don't think too many people are thinking about his journey here and what it actually means for his prospects on the show. And I gotta say, like, I think what he's getting from this show is more valuable than what he signed up to get. What he signed up to get was a shot at dating and potentially marrying a beautiful woman who, in Joan, who has a lot of wonderful qualities. But I think what he's going to get instead is he's going to get some closure and he's going to get some
Hmm.
understanding and stuff that is clearly deep down, just roiling his insides on a daily basis. And I think of the two things that he could potentially get out of this, what he's actually going to get is going to be
Yeah.
far more valuable to him for the rest of his life.
Yeah,
Am
I
I?
mean, you can actually, and I said it while we were watching it, like you can see him healing. Like I just got choked up, like even just saying that out loud. Like you can see like the way like the holes in his heart are kind of being kind of patched over. Like it's really beautiful to see, and yeah, it's invaluable. And yeah, no, I don't think he ends up with Joan. I don't think that's what it's about. I don't even think I don't know that that was actually his goal or his daughter's goal when he was signed up. I think it was have this experience, have an opportunity to consider meeting someone new, moving on to a different part of your life. And it seems as though he didn't know where he was at with that until he got here. And I think it seems like every episode he's feeling a little bit more comfortable with that, with allowing himself to be happy, experience joy, allowing, as you said, the acceptance. That conversation he had with Guy and then he relayed later to Joan was just like really quite important to Charles. And I don't know how much you want to get into it, but holding on to just this big unknown for 6 years, and not only is it an unknown, but within the unknown of what was going on with my wife when she was dying, was this sense of he could have prevented it. It was
Mhm.
partially his fault, like the guilt that he's been carrying with him for years, is it just the relief that we see he seems so much lighter. And when we were watching the initial conversation with Guy, the note that I had written down was meaning making. And one of the things that he keeps saying is I keep asking why and why and why. And Guy finally says to him, like, you've got to stop asking yourself why. Like, you've got to stop. Like, she just had an aneurysm. It just happened.
Mhm.
And there is no reason. And so often, especially in grief, we want to make meaning out of what happened. We want to understand. We want to understand not only why it happened, but its purpose. And he kept saying, why did this happen to her? Why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to us? Like, we want so badly to understand it, and it's our own effort to try to cope with the loss. If we make it make sense, that it feels like it is easier to tolerate, it's easier to move through. And that's on some level true, but we can't always find meaning. And sometimes leaning too much on meaning making actually takes us away from the experience of grief itself, that we really do need to let ourselves feel. And so that was something that seemed so notable when watching the Charles and Guy conversation. And we see it kind of conclude when he shares it with Joan later.
Mhm. Yeah. I think when you said it's like we can actually physically see him healing, pretty much sums up, the entire Charles L. Kind of arc for this
Mhm.
episode, and really probably for this entire season so far.
Mhm.
I'm such a big fan, and again, Guy, I said it at the top of the episode. Guy is just a good dude, and just and not to get sidetracked too much, but later on with Kim wants to do this song thing. Everyone else says to Kim, not interested, not doing it. Who's the guy who stands up next to him and does it? Guy. So like this scene with Guy and Charles, I thought was so wonderfully placed by production
Mm-hmm.
because it really put together two guys that we, for very different reasons, I think the audience is generally growing pretty high on for two very distinct and different reasons, and gave them an opportunity to sort of set a foundation in the episode where they both would go on and have two completely different arcs. Whereas one is this sort of behind the scenes guy who is just a support structure for other people, which I
Mm-hmm.
just want to point out is a parallel to what Joan has said that she often is.
Yeah, I was
And
going to
I
bring that
think
up.
that could play relevant. Yeah, I could think that could be very relevant later on,
Mm-hmm.
if he has the opportunity to really show and demonstrate that
Mm-hmm.
to Joan. Meanwhile, you get Charles doing this other arc, and I thought production was really smart in how they kind of laid out the events of this episode, setting it up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But we got onto this topic because Charles L and the group date. I wanted to point out he had perhaps the worst kick in the history of kickball. But you know what? The way that the guys, and this is really more of a male dynamic thing, the way that these guys have rallied around each other and have supported one another on a level that is unseen in this franchise, as far as I can tell. And we thought that we had seen a height of it with the women of Gary's season of The Golden Bachelor. I think that this far, far supersedes that. I want your thoughts on that, but I just, even the guys in the face of cameras are saying like wasn't expect, or when they were talking to Joan, I was not expecting this level of support. Like really, honestly, everything's cool. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
no issues here really. And you just see it. Everyone walks in the room, everyone gets a hug, everyone gets congratulated. There doesn't appear to be any real animosity. And
Mm-hmm.
as a male, knowing what it's like in these power settings, um, to see that like that lack of a struggle, we'll say, is just fascinating to me because it's something you just don't see in male circles at my age and certainly younger. And it gives
Mm-hmm.
me a glimpse into what I could potentially see in 20 years, which is
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you definitely see it in the kickball game. Like Mark, they commented on it, like giving hugs so freely, like even to the other team. And that's something that we don't see a lot in these like competitive dates. Like we see a lot of support in inter team, but not in intra team.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was just so great and so very nice to see. And I do wonder, like, to your point, like how does this happen? Is this just truly ego death? Like, do you just come to a certain point in life? I mean, all of these men have so much more life experience. They have perspective. We hear Gary talk about that when he's talking about prayer and seeing every day as a miracle, and I think that maybe it does this level of perspective. Like this stupid bullshit doesn't matter, right? Like if we how well we do at kickball or like which team wins, like they just have just different perspective, more depth of perspective that you at 41, these other men on The Bachelor at, 26, 30, they simply can't have.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to guess that's a big part of it. While Joan is on this date with the men, she gets interrupted. She gets a phone call regarding her mom, Mary, who's 92, and her mom is not feeling well, and Joan becomes kind of preoccupied with this news, with this phone call, and we see her. Um, this is the catalyst actually for her to kind of make a pivot later in the episode.
What would you call it? The catalyst? I thought the catalyst was more when she's seeing the Hawks with Jonathan. I thought this was more of the like in my mind was this is where it really started to build, where the pressure was
Sure.
building to a point, right? And it was clear that at this point she was self aware that she was getting distracted. She was self
Mm-hmm.
aware that she was finding herself being a little more guarded. Um, but at this point, she's not really prepared to do anything about it, right? And she's sort of like, the way she's talking and sort of face to camera is that she's more or less muscling through, and she talks a lot about how these guys are great and they're being so vulnerable and open, and because they're being so engaging, it's easy for her to sort of like forget about what's happening for a few minutes at a time. But despite all of that, like whenever there's even a slight lull in the action, she is dragged right back into it right away. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's sort of the backdrop to all of this. And so while the guys are putting their best foot forward and they are, doing the best that they can, she knows that the impediment at this point is her and her
Mm-hmm.
inability to really engage because she is distracted. And I want to just say here, it takes a lot to admit that, but that is a very human thing. That there's actually nothing wrong with that situation. We all deal with it all the time, right? I mean, there's always things going on in our personal lives, and it's okay to be distracted. I think the important thing here with Joan was that she was aware of it, right?
Listen, the reality is, and again, why none of this is particularly surprising to me as a therapist is because in being a therapist, there is this misconception that you need to be able to compartmentalize your work and home and all of that stuff, and that's an old school thought, that we aren't robots. We just like can't do that, and so it makes a lot of sense to me that um, that your home life would dramatically influence and impact the way that you viewed yourself, other people, interactions. And part of what we as therapists, anyway, need to really work on is checking that and being able to regulate that so that our ability to assess remains objective and not informed by what we have been experiencing. Um, and alongside that, the thing that Joan we start to hear Joan talk about, as we referenced earlier, is her role of being a caregiver, and that she is feeling this immense guilt for being in her role of caregiver and not being able to do it 100%. That her focus is split. That she is not physically there for her mom, is preoccupied, and doing this journey feels it sounds like a little bit selfish because she is here and her family is elsewhere, and so I think that again is foreshadowing what we hear a bit later in the episode.
Mhm.
What I will also add, again, Joan, her identity as a caregiver, what does Joan do that I thought was just like amazing? She arranges for the men to get massages the next day, because they're so beaten up by this group date.
All right, shall we move on to Jonathan's date?
Mm-hmm.
So I think Jonathan's a great case study in massive insecurity, which is so weird because he just seems like a guy who would be kind of confident. He's tall, he's handsome, he's jacked to the moon with short muscle. He's, did I already say charismatic? Like he's just like, what does this guy not have going for him? And yet he just seems to be racked and riddled with insecurity, which is I think it's crazy to me. But I think it does also demonstrate like it does not matter who you are. It does not matter what you have going for you. We all have insecurities, and they show in very different ways. And it's that grass is always greener, or looking over the fence, or beating the Joneses, or measuring yourself against TikTok. It's all that same kind of nonsense. Like we're
Not
all
really.
human.
I mean, Jonathan has had two experiences that we know. I'm sure there are more that have fed into this narrative of him being not enough. We heard last week that he asked someone to prom, and they like a week before said no. He also talked about being the only person of color in his high school, so he probably felt really isolated and might not have felt enough or like he quite fit in. Like that definitely impacts the way you view yourself. You internalize that. And then we hear that his wife, the mother of his kids, shows up one morning out of the blue and says, "I don't want to marry you anymore. Get out." And he's once again left thinking, what did I do? What could I have done more? I must not be enough. Like, and so, yeah, I mean, he's got all the goods. Like he's, on paper, he's a fucking all-star, but it's so hard for him to contend with rationality, what the facts are when he has life experience, he has data, so to speak, to support the fact that he's not good enough.
Well, but that's actually my point is when you look at this individual, you think like, why would he ever be insecure, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
point is that we all carry things that are going to make us insecure. That's really the point. And so when we sit there and we look at people on TikTok or look at people on Instagram and we sit there and think about, oh, look at the vacation they're on or how great their life is, the reality is that we are all human and we all nothing is ever as perfect as it looks on the outside. We all carry some sort of damage, some sort of insecurity, and it is a distinctly human thing. And I feel for Jonathan because I feel like he should have more confidence because he does seem like such a cool guy. But at the same time, I do think it's just a fascinating watch to see. It's like if somebody just had reality day on Instagram where I'm sorry, today we're actually just going to post what our real day is like and what it's really like being us. That's almost what it feels like when we see Jonathan on the screen.
Mm,
It's like, you know, the mask comes off, so to speak, and
yeah.
it's sort of a beautiful thing to see, even though it's hard to watch because you just feel like this guy has not set the appropriate value on himself. If that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I've ever in the history of watching the show heard someone say, I didn't want the one-on-one date. And again, it's not that he didn't want to spend time with Joan, it was that he worried that spending one-on-one time would expose him,
Mm-hmm.
and that she would send him home. And that again is such a great illustration of the depth of his insecurity, especially following him getting the group date rose last week and the connection they appear to have and the conversations that we've seen. Like it really those scars run deep for him.
And I also want to point out the response from the rest of the guys. If this was a normal age season,
Mm-hmm.
if a guy said that in the room, you would have face to cameras from every other guy saying, well, if he doesn't want it, I'll take it. What's wrong with
No,
this guy?
they would have
Here for
they
the
would have
wrong reasons.
told Joan
Oh,
that
absolutely. He's here for
yeah,
the wrong reasons. He's not
yeah.
ready. Exactly. It would have been a whole big thing. Across 15 different dimensions, we would have seen this be a big thing. In this season, not a one person mentions it. He basically gets a pat on the back and says, you're going to be fine. You're going to do great.
Mm-hmm.
Go forth and just be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just again, coming back to the male dynamics at this age, it's just a fascinating difference from what we see in other seasons.
Mm-hmm.
But the date itself for Jonathan, again, horseback, we already got into it. Don't love it. But when he does have his time on the bench, he does very similar to Pascal. He makes the most of it. The big difference here is that Jonathan has already used a lot of this time at the prom date, and pretty much every opportunity he's had to really show who he is and share and be vulnerable. So I think this landed less impactfully than say Pascal's did, but it's not because it wasn't impactful. It's because we've already seen this side of Jonathan already. And it just sort of really just reiterated and doubled down on, I think, feelings and opinions we already have about him, and just, further deepens kind of our understanding of who he is. But, as a date, it's pretty clear that he got the bum end of the stick.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Jonathan is really consistent in terms of like who he is and the experiences that have shaped him. Like it sounds like he's been really upfront about that from the beginning. So I really appreciated that. I also liked learning about his Native American side, about how he relates to like the imagery of a turtle. That's also just like good to share when you are dating somebody, to let them know kind of how you might react to discomfort, is that you do sort of pull away and maybe put up like a protective outer shell. And so I thought that was again good to share, and we learn more about why, as I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned before, in regard to his divorce.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So anything else noteworthy about Jonathan's date that we want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think Joan says that this has been the man that has been the most open with her. She and I think that is probably really important for Joan. And then as was referenced before by you, maybe the most pivotal part of this episode is when they are riding their horses back and there are hawks everywhere, and um, they're squawking or whatever birds do. I don't like birds. They're making noise. They're flying around. And we learned at the opening episode, the pilot episode of the season, that hawks are they symbolize John, her husband, and so that is where we see this big pivot for Joan.
Yeah, and this is really the catalyst moment where we see her realize that she has to make a change. It was really a beautiful moment of kind of realization that that's like, okay, all of these men are being really open and honest with me, and I'm just not reciprocating in kind, which
Mm-hmm.
has been specifically my criticism, and you've shared in some of it, maybe not to the degree, but that we need to see less guarded, less perfection out of her, and just more genuine authenticity. And it feels like this is the moment she realized it as well. So we roll into the cocktail party, and she walks in and she sits down and she wastes no time, doesn't bury any leads. She just gets right into it. And it is a powerful, direct, concise
Yeah.
indictment on her own behavior and her commitment and conviction and promise to all of them to do better. And it was beautiful, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was honest, it was raw. It had everything you want. It had explanation of the problem, right? It had commit the definitional of commitment of wanting to resolve it, and then solution oriented. This is how I'm going to fix it, and now cocktail party. Let's execute on my plan. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right? Am I wrong?
I mean, I think there's, I mean, I think the, yes, that's not inaccurate. It's just the transparency that she provided at a great risk potentially was, I mean, that is, again, that is what vulnerability is, being honest with the risk that you could lose something. And one two really meaningful things that Joan talked about. The first one I really resonated with, when she had said, in my life, I'm the caregiver. So when you all tell me things, I feel like I need to take care of you, but I'm not telling you things about me. And that was so relatable to me, again, as a therapist and being kind of the caregiver role in some relationships in my life. I know other individuals who play a caregiver feel this way too. That like it, in a lot of ways, it is so much easier to lean in as a caregiver in across relationships if that is how you understand and know your role to be. It also is a way to hide from vulnerability. I find it much more comfortable and much easier to listen and be there for others than it is to share about me and what's going on with me and ask for help and support. And it sounds like for Joan, that's not a muscle that she has built over time. If she, again, plays this role of being 100% caregiver, that it's really probably a little foreign for her and not as comfortable for her to be receiving of care, for even to let herself think that she deserves it, to let her guard down enough to do that, to abandon her post. And so I appreciated her talking about that and talking about how kind of being a caregiver and being strong in this way is really exhausting. So I thought that was, again, in terms of getting to know her, really important. But then the other thing she says that we've kind of assumed, but she just came right out and said, is that John, her husband, was a huge piece of her heart, and he will always have a piece of her heart. She will never be able to give 100% of her heart away. She will never be 100% ready. She could maybe consider 80 or 90%, but a part of her heart will always reside with John, and that's what she's got. She feels ready to give that much away, and
Mhm.
I thought that was really, really important to say. And it sounds like it was really relatable to a lot of the men who have experienced loss as well. Like it made sense. And so maybe this part of her that felt guilty or fearful, again, not being able to be 100% for someone else, was actually probably a relief for some of the men who might have felt similar to her, and not being able to give that.
I agree with everything you said. I I really thought this was a strong moment for Joan. This was the moment where I I felt like, okay, now I can really kind of lay off and not be quite as critical of Joan at this point. She's done everything I've asked of her, and she's done it better than I could have expected. And, I think the guys minus one all had great responses to this. I do think that we got to talk about, and let's see if we agree or disagree. Did one guy have a less than ideal reaction to this in your mind? Or maybe more than one, but there's one in my mind.
I have one in my mind. Who was yours?
Chalk.
Yeah, Chalk. Yep.
Not a great response. He pulls her first. No problem with that. Um, the thing with Chalk here is that they've had a great connection, but in the past they've been a little bit stiff with one another. But they clearly have the interest in each other and connection, right? And he seems genuine in a lot of ways. But in that conversation, leading off in that situation, there's a little bit of an obligation to wade a little slowly into the pool and read the room. I don't think it's advisable for him to sort of ask, like, hey, are you even committed to this process anymore? Like, what are we all doing here at this point? I know that's not exactly how he said it, but that's what he said, right? That's what he asked. And I was like, oh, Chalk, man, don't love that.
Well, he asked the question, she started to answer, and then he just talked over her. And he's done this before. It's
Yeah.
really it really is annoying. Like
Yeah.
it feels like he just asks a question so that he could respond to her answer, you know?
So, yeah, so that he basically asks the question so that she can
He can
answer and
talk.
then do what about you? And he can do he's just trying to get to the what about you,
Mhm,
basically is what you're saying.
mhm, yeah.
Outside of him though, I thought everyone else handled it pretty well. And I do think that in the room he handled it perfectly well. It was once
Mhm,
he
mhm.
pulled her aside for the one-on-one time.
Yeah,
Um
yeah, and things that we see the other men do. Gary reads a prayer that he wrote for her mom
mhm,
that he had framed. Charles shows a photo of his wife and also shares like a really beautiful sentiment around like readiness, which I thought was really nice. Guy and Ken sing their song, sing Ken's
Kim.
song rather, Kim's song rather. And then we also see another like very brief moment um of Guy or like writing her a prescription for something. I think Jordan gives her like a black and white cookie. So like the
Mhm,
men are really trying to do their thing to cheer her
mhm,
up or to be there for her in their own way.
mhm.
So I thought that was sweet. And then we get a surprise visitor.
So let's just say, given the tone and the direction of the episode, when we found out, and we knew it was already teased that we were getting this, that we were getting the drop in guest, I really didn't love this at the outset. It just felt like this isn't the time, this isn't the moment. And I know that they schedule it ahead of time, but it just felt to me like, oh man, production clearly didn't know what she was going to do in this moment. And I was a little resentful when he shows up, simply because I thought it might take away from the really powerful moment that Joan had just shared.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and of course, we all know the surprise guest is Golden Bachelor number one, Gary Turner. Now, I rescind all of those concerns, and I actually thought it ended up being a beautiful moment, and I thought it really empowered the moment and ended up not taking away from what she had just previously
Mm-hmm.
the speech she had given to the guys. So kudos to production here, and kudos to Jen, and kudos to Carrie. Like it was a wonderful episode from start to finish. It really
Mm-hmm.
was.
Mm-hmm.
But give me your thoughts on this Gary thing. How'd you feel when he shows up?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really sure what the play was going to be. You know, Gary, in a lot of ways, was a very successful Golden Bachelor, but he also left, got married, and got divorced within a few months. So he's not necessarily. I don't know how much credibility he has. Um, in one sense, but in another, he had a really successful season, and he did meet someone that he really loved. So like I guess or appeared to love or said he loved. I don't know. So I guess since in a lot of in a lot of ways maybe that's all that matters, right? Is that maybe that's what success is here, that you just like find a renewed sense of hope and love at the end of this. Maybe that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so I was like a little like who what do you have to say? But I think it ended up being like a opportunity for a lot of reassurance. We hear Joan say that she was kind of missing her family a lot, and so seeing a familiar face that's kind of outside of what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
someone that she doesn't need to take care of, that could be there and take care of her, that's been where she's been, probably was really grounding for her, and it felt like her mood was really light. When they parted, which I think was important. So I was definitely not high on it when he walked out of the limo, but I was like, oh, that was really, really nice.
Mm-hmm. So shall we move on to the rose ceremony?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have everybody in the dates got a rose. Oh, we didn't mention Gil got the date rose. The group date rose rather. Really, that was based on a connection around adopting and her mother being an orphan and stuff like that. It seemed he did really put out a lot in the game itself, but no more than any of the other guys. So this was one of those group dates where it just felt like the rose could go anywhere, and I
Mm-hmm.
had just kind of felt like a dart against a wall. But it
Mm-hmm.
goes to Gil. So we got Pascal, Gil, and Jonathan that are all safe. We are eliminating 3, which
Mm-hmm.
means there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 roses that are going out
Mm-hmm.
in this. So we're basically going from 14 down to 11.
Mm-hmm.
So in order: Guy, Dan, Gary, Jordan, Chuck, Charles L., Keith, and Mark. I thought it was really interesting and a little anticlimactic that they end with Charles L., Keith, and Mark, because those 3 just felt like, well, obviously they're safe. So it really
Yeah.
took a lot of the suspense out for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it does mean that the eliminated folks are Kim, which we're not really surprised about. We thought he was on the chopping block last week.
Mm-hmm.
CK also was on the chopping block last week. I thought Jack could have replaced either one of them. And yes, production, I'm still upset that Jack was not here for the kickball game. I think he would have been hilarious in the kickball game.
Oof. That's
And
probably why
then,
he got eliminated. They're like, he's
yeah,
gonna get
right.
too weird.
Yeah, right. He'd be doing cannonballs, and then the final one was Greg. Greg was one of those guys where he was around, but I don't think he ever really had his moment to shine in the show. He had a couple of funny face to cameras, but like we didn't really see him, I think, on any meaningful dates. Kim got a lot of time. CK got a decent amount of time, though we didn't really see a lot of CK in really date scenarios either, and really see the connection. So I don't think we've got any surprises here. I'm happy you asked about my rose this week.
Love it. My thorn this week.
I hated to see that. All right, Rose and Thorn.
Yeah. What do you got?
All right. So look, my rose is very obvious this week. I've been asking Joan for exactly what she gave us this week. She gave it to me. It would be unfair of me to not give a full bouquet of roses to Joan. Thank you for the authenticity. Thank you for the vulnerability. Thank you for taking all of my criticism and throwing it back in my face and saying, you know what, Chris, bam, eat it. And that's what she did this episode. And I couldn't be more happy. And I really feel like now, like the episode can really start now. Now this is when the journey begins for her, I think.
Mm.
You like what I did there?
I do.
Tell me what your rose is this week.
I mean, I won't double down on your roses. I noticed you gave her a bouquet. But yeah, I mean, Joan was like just a standout. This episode, I feel like in the past episodes, like the men have been the stars and Joan has facilitated. I think she was equal co-star with her cast. This episode, she just really she was pretty incredible. And I also loved the dress that she wore at the end. But my, oh gosh, like I feel like it's too easy to give it to Charles L. But I do want to give him a rose for like his openness to doing this, to again doing things he's never done before, whether it's consider dating somebody new, playing football, kickball for the first time, like all of that stuff. Like he's really putting himself out there, and that's really really great to see. So I think he can get a rose. But I think I also need to give the art department a rose for the way that they just continue to upcycle these benches. Like, good for you. Honestly, I mean, way to really just squeeze everything you can out of these items that you've collected. I love it. Good for you.
We didn't talk about this before with Kim's song, but obviously, it was a bit of a sidetrack thing. But Kim writes this song. He tries to get all the guys to sing it. They all basically say no, not interested, except for Guy. I think that this is relevant in two ways. I do think that we have to point out that Guy at least deserves a rose petal at a minimum for just being a good guy. He was the guy who brought a little bit of closure and solace to Charles L. He also stood up there and did the song with Kim when no one else would go up and sing it with him. And I think you just have to recognize just what a good guy actually is. And I think this is an episode where it really demonstrated the quality of his character. So you got to give him at least a rose petal for that.
Absolutely.
The downside to this on the Kim thing is, what is Kim just a female version of my mother? Just making up wacky songs everywhere. So for those who don't know, my mother will frequently come up. She's very creative. She will frequently just come up with these random parody songs, and we'll just get a text message just dropped into a family chat, and it'll just be her singing some wacky parody song. She's been doing this my entire life. The first one I remember was one about Lorena Bobbitt. All right, so like that's how old this process goes back, and it just it sort of hit me as a like in some ways a little nostalgic for my upbringing, but also a little bit like, oh, this shit again. like this is too close, hitting too close to home, people. It's hitting too close to home. But really, my official thorn of this week is just the dates. The horse date specifically. I'm so tired of the horse date. Can we stop with the horses? Right? It's like I don't want you putting spiders on people, and I don't want you having them ride any more horses. We're done with the spiders. We're done with the horses. New dates, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to let myself off the hook another week and say, like, I really love this episode. I can't think of a thorn. But then I did think of one, and you just kind of took it.
Anything that reminds you of my mother is a thorn.
No, it's more like this is not really a knock against Kim, but like I had some like secondhand embarrassment for him for like what he was like going around and like soliciting, trying to get his song sung. And I just think it's just really uncomfortable anytime anyone's just like performing in front of you in that way. And so that would not be my ideal thing. It's like when people sing happy birthday to you, like, what are you supposed to do? I hate it. It's like the worst experience ever. Or like when people give you a gift and you have to open it in front of them. I just like, ugh, I don't like it.
I hate opening gifts in front of people. Like
Yeah.
it's just one of those things. Yeah. All right. Should we get out of here?
Yes, let's do it. We will be back next week with episode 4 of Joan's season of The Golden Bachelorette. Until then, you can follow along with us on Instagram at Reactivity TV. We would also love to see you hanging out in our comments. We love the commentary. We love the conversation. So check in with us in the comments underneath this video. And again, hit that like and subscribe button. Those little taps go a long way. If you have any feedback, suggestions, other comments that you don't necessarily want to put on YouTube, feel free to email us at reactivitytv@revivecfw.com. We will see you next week. Bye.
Do you know next week it's a double header on Dancing with the Stars? See you, everybody.
Bye.